Okay, let's see. So as I mentioned earlier, what we're going to focus on now is we're going to look at we're going to start to look into the idea of post-production. So we're going to be bringing JPEG images from Sketchup into Photoshop, okay? So also, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the general consensus on what people think of Sketchup views is that it has a very distinct look, right? So it definitely has that Sketchup-y look. So if you look at this, what we have on the screen, this is basically what you get out of Sketchup as a default, okay? Now there are options on how you can manipulate what you see here on the screen with some new nice features of SketchUp. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes real quick. Okay, so what we're going to look at first is we're going to look at how to create scenes. Okay, so if we go over to our menu over here on the right hand side, you're going to see a button that says Scenes. Okay, if we click on that button, what that allows us to do is to set up a view and to save all of the different properties of that scene, okay? So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna create a view of our house that we feel is maybe kind of one of the more prominent views that we like. So spin around your model a little bit and kind of stop at an angle to which you feel is a nice view, okay? So I'm gonna center that onto my screen, and then over here right under scenes, we're gonna click on the add scene button, okay? So what that will do is it will duplicate what you have in the scene plus all of the properties that are associated with it. So if you have added other things like materials or styles, which we'll talk about in a second, it will include all of those and save it as a part of that scene, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and click on the plus sign, and let's call this, we're gonna go ahead and right click on it, and I'm going to click on rename scene, and down here below I'm going to rename that scene. We'll say perspective 1, and that will do it, okay? So from there, we're gonna look at a couple other options on how to get some more depth to our SketchUp image, okay? So if we go up to view, we can go ahead and go down to shadows. And if we click on shadows, that will give us another layer of added dimension to our scene, okay? Notice that if I go back and let's say I spin this model around and I go click on that scene again, perspective 1. Let's see, double click on it. Let's see, come on. Let's see, why are you not turning? It should go back to our scene. Why is it not doing that? Update scene. Sorry about that. Why is that not working? Delete scene. Okay, hold on. Let me go back just a second. Let me reposition this. I'm going to turn on my shadows real quick. Shadows. I'm going to go ahead and click on add scene, and we'll just leave that. Let me rename that really quick to perspective 1. Okay, so I'll come back to, I'm not sure why that wasn't moving around there just a second ago, but we'll come back to that in just a second. So as you can see now, we have kind of our basic SketchUp look, and we also have the shadows turned on in our model, okay? So the next thing that we're going to look at is we're gonna look at the different styles in our model, okay? So if we click on styles and we go to, we'll say for example, default, we can click on these different style categories that we have here, and it'll kind of give us a variety of different looks for that particular scene. So I'm just going to click on a handful of them and we'll kind of see how they work. Okay, notice that now we don't really have that sketchy look as a part of our scene. Okay, that's going to be the, I think this is hidden line. Let's see, hidden line. This is definitely acting a little bit different than I'm used to it acting. Usually if you hover your mouse over it, it should show you what it is that you're about to click on. So I believe this is the hidden line tool. That gives it just the basic line option, as if you're kind of working inside Revit or I guess not really AutoCAD because you're not working with a 3D model, but that's just going to give us a basic line, a basic black and white line model. Okay, let's look at some of these other different ones. Gosh, this is really weird that it's not showing me. Oh, okay. See, it's saying it up here on the top. Okay, so that's shaded. We have shaded with textures. This is called simple style, etc. Let's go back and look at a couple other different ones. So we have one called sketchy edges. Okay, this one right here is called charcoal loose. This one is called brush strokes wide. Oh, now it's showing me. So you'll notice that you have a variety of different styles that you can choose to get an overall effect that you're looking for inside SketchUp. What we're going to look at how to do today is we're going to look at how to combine multiple of these styles, and we're going to combine them inside Photoshop. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over and we're going to create our first scene. All right, so I'm going to go back over to let's see, I'm going to go back over to default styles, and I'm going to click on the one that says hidden line. Okay, so right here in the upper right hand corner, that's going to be my hidden line scene. Before I export my view, I'm going to go up to view. I'm going to turn off my shadows for the time being, okay? And I'm going to go up to view, and I'm going to turn off my axes, and I'm going to turn off my, I think actually that's it. I'm going to turn off my guides as well. There's no guides in this view at the moment, but the goal for this first scene that we're about to export is that we have nothing else on our screen. So the way that SketchUp works when you export a view is that it will export the view exactly as you see on your screen, okay? It will export the axes, it will export the whatever the background color is. So the goal for the first scene that we're going to create is to have it just be a simple black and white line drawing, okay? I'm going to go back over, actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and go back over to File, okay? And then from there, I'm going to go down to Export, and we're going to export a 2D graphic, all right? So I'm going to click on, I don't know what that was all about. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Export, and I'm going to go to 2D graphic. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this to, you're going to want to save this to your thumb drive. I'm not going to plug mine in quite at the moment. So I'm just going to save this to my desktop for a second. So I'm going to go ahead and call this, let's see, we'll call this Francis, probably what I had before would work just fine. Francis Ching _ hidden line, okay? Because we're going to end up creating 4 different views here in just a second, to which we will pull into Photoshop, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on Options next, okay? And we're going to go ahead and manipulate a few of the options that we have here to have a better quality and a better resolution image that we're going to work with later, okay? So I'm going to uncheck Use View Size, okay? So by clicking Use View Size, it will export it as exactly as it is on the view, okay? I'm looking for something that's a little bit better quality, so I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm going to go ahead and change the width to 3000, okay? So by changing the width to 3000, notice that it automatically updates the height so that it continues to remain proportionate, okay? So I believe as a part of SketchUp Pro, I believe you can export images up to 10,000 pixels, okay? So you can get a pretty big and pretty sharp image, but for what we're doing, 3,000 pixels should work just fine. Just make sure that whatever you decide to export at, make sure that you export all of your next images, all of the next 3 images that we create at the same value, okay? That will allow them to all overlay over each other in Photoshop just the way that we want, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Everything else is just fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and I'm going to click on Export. All right, it'll take just a second to do that, and then we can go ahead and move on to our next scene that we're going to create, okay? From there, I'm going to go over to Edit, all right? And I'm going to go to, let's see, right here on the very left-hand side, we're going to click on, actually we're going to look for what says Face Settings, okay? So you're going to click on Edit, and then just to the right of where it says Edge Settings, you're going to click on Face Settings, all right? And we're going to click on the button that says X-Ray, okay? So we're going to click on X-Ray, and we're going to notice that all of our house is now basically see-through. It's now transparent, and you can kind of see the elements in the middle of the model, okay? So where this might be really effective later on down the future, maybe when we're creating our perspectives for our cabins, is maybe you want to see a perspective where you want to see kind of the inside of your house a little bit. This method would work really nicely for trying to create that kind of a perspective, okay? So from here, we're going to go ahead and go up to, let's see, we're going to go ahead and go up to File, and we're going to go to Export again, and we're going to do 2D Graphic, and we're going to do the same exact thing, but we're going to call this X-Ray. All right, so this is going to be 2 of 4 images that we're going to create. So I'm going to go ahead and call this X-Ray, and I'm going to hit Export. All right, so that's going to be our second image. All right, let's go ahead and create the third one. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck X-Ray so that we have back to our hidden line view. Okay, I'm going to go back over and click on, Edit again, and I'm going to click on Edge Settings, which is going to be the icon just to the left of Face Settings. Okay, we're going to click on Edge Settings, and I'm going to turn off edges. Okay, notice that what that gives us is a blank screen. Okay, and what we're going to do next is we're going to go up to View, and we're going to turn on our shadows. Okay. So now all you're going to see is you're going to see the shadows of all of the faces of the model that we're working on, but we don't have any of the line work. Okay, so this is the effect that we're looking for. If you don't like, really quickly, I'm just going to turn back on the edges. If you don't like the positioning of the shadows that you see right here, over here in your right hand column, you can go down to where it says Shadows, and you can actually manipulate the time, the day, and the time, and the actual time of the year of what those shadows look like. Okay, so right now we're in October, but notice if I bring it over to February that we get a lot different look. Okay, so feel free to manipulate how you want those shadows to look however you wish. Okay, you can also manipulate how dark and how light your shadows come in. Okay, so notice that as I move my toggle to the left, and that's actually not the one I want. But if I move my dark toggle, the light would actually end up doing something if you ended up turning on the ambient shadows. We're not going to do that because I actually want to be able to manipulate that in Photoshop versus doing it in SketchUp. Okay, but if you want to manipulate how dark or how light your shadows, you're going to go down to where it says dark, and you can manipulate them however you wish. I usually like it to be right around the middle point at about 50. Okay, so again, to create the third scene, I'm going to go back up to Edit, and I'm going to uncheck edges, but I want to leave my shadows on. Okay, so remember, I have not moved my model anywhere as of yet. Okay, the whole goal is that I'm exporting the same exact image with a variety of different styles that we will later import into Photoshop. Okay, so again, I'm going to go to File, Export 2D Graphic, and I'm going to go ahead and call this Francis Ching House. I'm going to call this Shadows. Okay, and we'll call that, we'll go ahead and click on Export, and then from here we're going to go ahead and create one more scene. I'm going to turn back our edges back on. I'm going to turn off my shadows. Okay, and then I'm going to go back over to Styles. I'm going to go to Select, and then I'm going to go down to the Sketchy Edges option. Okay, and which one you use here is completely up to you. Okay, there's a handful that I kind of know work well. Some will work really well, some won't. Okay, so you have to do a little bit of experimenting on which styles you want to use. The one that I'm looking for is actually called Pen Gray. I think it's going to be Pen Blue. Let's see, right here, Pen Gray. Okay, so I'm going to click on Pen Gray. Notice that I get a kind of a much looser, much sketchier look of my model. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run with this one. You might also try another one called Airbrush. Let's see. I'm not going to look over all of them, but I know it's in this. Well, there it is right there. So there's another one that I kind of like to use quite a bit too. So you may try that one. You may try Pen Gray, but which one you actually choose is up to you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use Pen Gray, and again, I'm going to go up to File. Why does it keep doing that? I'm going to go to File, Export, and 2D Graphic again, and I'm going to call this one Pen Gray. Okay, and then we're going to hit Export, and that's going to be all we do in SketchUp at this moment. Okay, from here we're going to go ahead and transition over to Photoshop. All right, so we've created our 4 images, and let's find Photoshop and open this guy up. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do inside Photoshop to start this post-production process is I'm going to go ahead and open our first file, and I'm going to open up all of the files after that in the order that we exported them. Okay, so I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to go to my desktop where I saved my images. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and open the first one that we created, which was the hidden line view. I'm going to go ahead and click on Open, and here we have the exported view of our house. Okay. So next, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to Place, and I'm going to go ahead and place the next one, which is the X-ray. All right, I'm going to go to File, Place, and notice that it places this. I'm going to go ahead and click on my arrow, and I'm going to place it. But notice that it places directly on top of the previous image. Okay, the reason why that happens is because we exported the exact same view with the exact same size of the screen. Okay, if you were to tweak that size just a little bit, it wouldn't work out. Okay, so it's important not to, go spin your model around. But the reason why we created our scene is that you can always go click on that scene again, and it'll bring you back to that original location. Okay, so here is our X-ray. All right, I'm going to go ahead and export, actually, before I bring in the next ones. So right now, if I turn off my X-ray layer, I could see my hidden line layer below that. All right, so if I click on my X-ray layer, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to I'm going to go ahead and click on my multiply blending mode. Okay, so we're now going back to where we started to learn about blending modes in Photoshop, and you're going to see how that starts to come into handy. Okay, so if we kind of do a little bit of a refresher, can someone tell me really quickly what multiply would do here? I know someone knows this. It's not going to make it darker, but what it's going to do is it's going to make the white background transparent, and it's going to keep all of the black lines. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on my X-ray layer that I just brought in, and I'm going to go ahead and change the blending mode to multiply. Okay, so notice that all of our lines got a little bit darker. Okay, so the reason why is because we now have two layers directly over on top of each other. All right, so now that I have that on multiply, I can go ahead and bring in my next couple layers. All right, so I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to then bring in my shadows. Go to Place. Okay, and I'm going to also apply a multiply blending mode to that. Okay, so notice that I can now see my shadows on top of my other 2 layers that I created. Now you might ask yourself, or you might be asking yourself, why didn't we just export a layer with all of the line work and the shadows together? Well, the reason why we don't do that is because we have more freedom and we'll have more freedom to manipulate the shadow layer by itself inside Photoshop. Okay, if you exported the 2 together, you're not going to have as much freedom in terms of editing just the shadows versus the shadows and the line work together. So by exporting them individually, we have more freedom to edit the individual components of just that layer. Okay, so that's the goal. So we're going to go ahead and do one more. We're going to go to File, Place, and we're going to upload our last one, which is going to be pen gray. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Place on top of that. And I'm going to also add the multiply layer to this. Okay, so now we have all 4 of our layers overlapping our model at one time. Okay, so the nice part about doing this as well is I can now click on any one of these layers, and I can adjust the opacity so that I could start to manage how much of that layer I want to see. Okay, so for example, if we look at how transparent our model is at the moment, okay, I can really see all of the individual cubes inside the house, but maybe I don't want to see it that much. Okay, so if I go over to my X-ray layer, I can start to reduce the opacity of that, and notice that how I could kind of barely see the insides of that now. So that might be more of a look that I'm actually trying to go after, okay? You can barely see it on the screen, but I can kind of barely see the transparency nature of those cubes, okay? If the sketchiness is a little too much and maybe you want to kind of reduce that a little bit, I can go up to the pen gray, and again, I can adjust the opacity so that that layer kind of shows only as much as I want it to, okay? So you can kind of start to see how it benefits to bring your work over into Photoshop versus to export just one view out of SketchUp, okay? So through Photoshop, I can combine multiple layers on top of each other and have more freedom to manipulate each of those layers as I wish, okay? So let's take this a step further before we export our final image, okay? And as soon as you export your final image, you're gonna go ahead and want to place it onto your title block, and then export that from InDesign as a PDF, and then upload that to Canvas, okay? But I'm going to click on my shadow layer, all right? And we're going to add a little bit of added dimension, and we're going to go back to our dodge and burn tool, okay? So remember when we did our dodge and burn tool, we were able to kind of manipulate both how dark and how light we wanted an object to be. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start to work on our ambient shadows, okay? So we all know that when you actually, if you were to look at a real image of, we'll say, a building that looks similar to this, you're going to have a lot darker shadows and a lot lighter shadows in certain areas, okay? So you might have darker shadows on this face than you would over on this face, okay? Because you're starting to go back underneath the building. So we can start to manipulate our shadows there. And you also know that, so you probably have darker shadows over in this area, but you're probably going to have much lighter shadows as the shadow casts off into further off into the distance, okay? So again, to use our dodge and burn tool, I'm going to click on our house layer, our shadow layer, and I'm going to create a new layer by going up to Layer, New Layer, okay? I'm going to go ahead and call this dodge and burn, and I'm going to change the, I'm going to go ahead and change the mode to overlay. Okay, and then we're going to click on the box that says fill with overlay neutral layer 50% gray. Okay, so this is just a little refresher on the dodge and burn, and we're going to click on OK. All right, from there, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we only apply the dodge and burn layer to just the shadows. Okay, can anybody tell me the shortcut to apply a layer just to the layer below? All right, so if I want to add the dodge and burn to my shadows, but I don't want it to affect my other layers, what am I going to do? Someone should know this. So if we want to apply the dodge and burn layer only to our shadows layer and not to the layers below.
Drag it to the layers.
Pardon me?
Drag it to the layers.
So you're saying to drag it onto the layer like this? Okay. There's actually a shortcut that I'm looking, you guys should know, we've used it before, to apply that layer just to the one below. You're close. You're close. So what we're going to press is we're going to do Control, Alt, and what key? What key? Control, Alt, G. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and do Control, Alt, G, and notice that you get that little arrow that shows that it's pointing to just the shadow layer below. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave my layer selected on my dodge and burn, okay, and let's go ahead and start to add a little extra depth to this, okay. So I'm going to go over to my dodge tool, which is going to be this little lollipop looking tool, all right, and then from there, I can go ahead and start to darken. Let's see, I need to change my hardness real quick. Oops. I'm sorry, I want my burn tool, not my dodge tool. So I'm going to go to my burn tool because I'm trying to make this darker. Let's go ahead and give the brush size just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so I can start to manipulate just that shadow layer. All right, notice that I'm kind of darkening the edges here in this particular face. All right, I can do the same thing over on this side. All right, so maybe we make this a little bit darker. All right, I'm going to make this face a little bit darker as well, and then I'm also going to make some of these areas even darker than the other areas. Okay. All right, so I'm clicking just here on the shadows, on the area just below the house. Okay, so I'm going to add that a little bit more over here, maybe a little bit over on this side. And notice that we're starting to get some added depth and some added shadow lines that we were looking for in our model. Okay, maybe a little bit over here. Okay, maybe it's a little darker up here in this corner. Okay, we all see how that's kind of working. All right, add just a little bit more. You guys may want to take a little bit more time to kind of get the look that you're looking for, but notice that I'm starting to get a little bit more gradation in my shadows. Okay, so the next step that I might do to liven this up just a little bit is I'm going to go to my dodge tool, and let's make my brush size just a little bit bigger, and I'm going to start to reduce the hardness just a little bit. Okay, let me move that back over to 0. But I'm going to start to kind of soften that edge of the shadow line, okay? Because we all know that shadows don't just end at a sharp, crisp line, okay? So I'm just going to soften up those edges just a little bit. Okay, maybe so that they kind of fade off into nothing just a little bit. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. All right, obviously I can spend a little bit more time on this and get this looking a little bit better, but that should kind of give you guys the idea of what we're trying to do here. Any questions at all? Questions?
I kind of missed the part where you placed the images and the order. I know that you started with the background.
Okay, so let me go back. Here, I'm just going to create a new file. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so any questions on this right here? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'll go back and I'll